Welcome, everyone, to How to Stop Having Shitty Conversations. That is our point. There's Greg. Good to see your face, sir. How to
Hello.
stop having shitty conversations. So, a couple of things. While we're in this space together this afternoon, can we all agree via show of hands to step into honesty, integrity, and humility, please? And I'm asking if you are open. Hands, rock on. Next, I'd like to get your permission for Dale and I to interrupt you if and when you're sharing a story, if you're talking too much, or if you're going way off track. With your permission, we will bring you back. Lastly, I want to say this is not the Dale and Jen show. While we are leading this charge, we want to hear from you. So you will be asked to share a particular story as we're on a particular topic. Dale, why are we here? What are we doing?
So, Jen, we are here. I think this started when you and I were having a meeting, and I think we were just kind of shooting the shit, and then we started talking about bad conversations that we had had. And it turned out that we both had been having a lot of bad conversations.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of was the genesis of this. And if you think about it, we have had certainly everybody in here, I'm sure, has had a bad conversation. Sometimes it is the other person. Many times it is us. Conversation, if you think about it, the ability to communicate is probably the single most important thing that we could ever do. Because life doesn't happen without communication, right? It happens, we communicate with our spouses and our children, we communicate with our customers and our coworkers and our bosses, et cetera, et cetera. So life basically revolves around communication. Hopefully that communication is effective. So we could all improve our communication skills, and that was kind of the genesis of this. So why Jen and why Dale? Well, Jen and I have been coaching other people on various different things for many years now. As you probably know, Jen specializes in sales. I do executive coaching and life coaching, and in that process, at least in my experience, getting a person from A to B is really about getting them to know themselves. That's what it comes down to almost in every case. Now, people come to you to be coached for a whole bunch of different reasons. They come to you to be coached for their sales skills. They come to you to be coached. They come for career coaching. They come for a relationship coaching. You fill in the blank. But what it comes down to ultimately is getting to know yourself much better. When you get to know yourself better, you become a more authentic and genuine person. And when you
Yeah.
become a more authentic and genuine person, you're a better communicator. So it's really all about just kind of that. And that's why we're here. So we've learned a lot, Jen and I, over the years, coaching people
Hmm.
about authenticity and about effective communication. And so I think that's why we want to put this on for you.
I love it. And excuse me, Dale, while you're about to display our agenda for today, I want you guys to just close your eyes for a quick minute and picture the word listen. Picture the word listen in your mind. And it's this simple. When you swizzle the letters, you can come up with the word silent. So, what does silence have to do with listening? That's a question. Jason, you're smiling. Why are you smiling? Tell us briefly.
Because that's witty.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I have a habit of not shutting up.
All right. Well, thank you for being here to help you stop having some shitty conversations. All
And thank
right.
you for being aware of that. That's awesome that you're actually aware of it and you're able to state it publicly. You're the half the battle is that right there.
I love it. So, with that, Dale, why don't you go ahead and put up the agenda slide and I will walk us through what we
Yes.
want to accomplish today.
There you go. Yes, you should be able to see it now.
Rock and roll. All right. So, we'll do brief introductions and then the three topics that we're going to talk about and share. Everyone is going to get to share if you so choose. Welcome and introductions. I'm Jen Halpern, and my company is Soft Sell Coaching, and I help sales organizations achieve their revenue targets. An emphasis of that is how to be an all-star listener and how to ask thoughtful, meaningful, and sometimes provocative questions. So, Dale, if you would take 30 seconds and introduce yourself to us, please.
Sure. I'm Dale Shover. My company's called Better Outcomes, and I do executive coaching. I also do fractional CFO work, which you might think those two things don't seem connected, but surprisingly enough, they overlap quite a lot. In my executive coaching and life coaching practice, I tend to focus on executives in transition, small business owners that are wanting to get from, to the next level. That's sort of my area of expertise. And in that process, as I said before, boy, you sure do get to see a lot of communication bad habits and communication good habits.
Oh, pause. Yes, love it. Thank you, Dale. So our three topics for today are shut up to level up, said with only love in our hearts, shut up to level up, let them land before you launch, read the room, and then we'll do a brief debrief, ask you all for some takeaways, and then we'll wrap it up. All right, Dale,
That we
if you
will.
would stop share. Thank you, sir. And kick us off. Shut up to level up. What's the psychology behind this?
Okay. So why are we going to talk about the psychology? So it occurs to me, the fact that you all are here already in my mind shows some level of self-awareness, right? That you're here to learn how to be a better conversationalist. Believe it or not, many people don't have that sort of level of self-awareness. But what I have found in many years of coaching other people is that once you become aware of the underlying psychology behind your habits and behaviors, it is much easier to change your habits and behaviors. One of the biggest reasons we struggle getting out of bad habits is because we don't understand the why of the bad habit. And I have also observed over the years that almost anything in life, whether it's within our personal lives or whether it's external to us, like the politics that's going on, all of this stuff can all be explained if you just take a minute to understand our underlying psychology. So, the underlying psychology. And again, first, let me put the disclaimer out there. I am not myself a psychologist, right? I have no training in psychology or psychiatry. So just as that disclaimer, I'm only speaking from what I've read and what I've learned and what I've personally experienced and observed. Um, what I believe to be the underlying psychology behind why we talk too much is sort of first and foremost is there's typically going to be some kind of an insecurity or social anxiety that is present when we talk too much. And it
Hmm.
could show up in a couple different ways. It may show up in what is known as knowledge signaling. So, knowledge signaling is the idea that you know a lot and you want the other person to know that you know a lot. And so we show that by talking a lot to show how much we know, right?
Yep.
Now, that is, whether that's bad or whether that's good, I'm not here to say. But what I am here to say is that that might be the explanation as to why you feel like you need to say more than is really necessary. So maybe
Yeah.
just take a minute to sort of reflect on, is that why I tend to talk too much?
Yeah.
Another reason go ahead, Jen.
Oh, no. Finish your thought, and then I'll jump in, and then I'll
Okay.
launch. Go ahead.
Okay, right. Okay, so um, another thing that I observe quite often when people are talking too much is that they may not be clear, and I say they, this is me too, because I'm also guilty of this, but we may not be clear on what it is that we want to say. Now, in everyday conversation, that's probably okay, right? In our more professional conversations, maybe it's with a prospective customer, or maybe we're given our sales pitch or whatever. You might want to be a little bit more honed on your message. And sometimes we can enter into a conversation with so much in our minds that we just don't know what to say, or we may not understand our own material well enough in order to say it succinctly, right?
Yeah.
So that might be part of that underlying psychology. Go ahead, Jen.
So, in terms of shut up to level up, I want to share a brief story, and then I'm going to ask someone in the audience to share a story in terms of shut up to level up. In my experience, I believe we human beings are desperate to be seen and heard and made to feel significant. So, here's an example in terms of shut up to level up. So, my daughter Jordan took a gap year from high school. Stay with me, I'm going to connect the dots. And not only did she study music, but she worked full time. And her goal was to save money to buy her first car. It's a big deal to buy your first car. And this was her moment. She had done her due diligence. She nailed it down to a Toyota dealership and then a Chevy dealership. So we go to the dealership. She and I walk in. And remember, track with me here. She's the buyer. She's the decision maker. And in her mind, she's ready to drive off the lot today. So we walk into the Toyota dealership. The sales guy walks up to me and engages me and launches at me with a whole bunch of dialogue, not questions. Hey, what's it going to take? I'm going to put you in this 2023 Toyota Camry today. And what it's going to take, we can get you to drive off this lot. And I've also got this Lexus and this and that. And I bet he spoke for about 3.5 minutes without pause. And Jordan pipes up and says, Mama, maybe you'll just keep driving me around. Maybe I don't need to get a car today. Let's go. So we walk out. I said, baby girl, what's going on? Why are we leaving? She's like, Mama, that guy, he did not look at me once. He did not acknowledge me. He did not stop talking. He did not ask us one question. There's no way I'm going to give that guy my business. So we go to the Chevy dealership. We walk into the Chevy dealership. We're introduced to sales rep, and we remember his name. His name is Philip. And Philip walks up to both me and Jordan. This is what he does. He walks up to us and he's doing this, and he looks at both of us and he says, hello, ladies. Who am I working with today? And then he shut his mouth, which allowed Jordan to lean in and pipe up. It's me. I'm the buyer. And then he did something else, a pro tip in terms of shut up to level up. When he asked her about 26 questions, they were not stacked one upon one after the other. It was, so Jordan, do you have any idea what kind of car you're looking at today? Okay, so tell me about why you're choosing this car. And he engaged her. And there were two things that happened. Fast forward a few hours later. Number one, Jordan drives off the lot in a 2025 Chevy Trax. So Philip got the deal. And then number two, she felt seen and heard and significant because she was given the permission and the space to talk. Make sense? I'd love to hear from one of you attendees. What's a story you got that
I think Dr.
resonates to
David
you?
says, I'm sorry.
Dr. David, you got
I think
one?
he's,
Shut up to level up.
Yeah,
Get it.
it's something that as I get older, I tried to stop doing. So I started my first company when I was 24, and my publicist at 26 recommended me to get a second doctorate before I was 30. And so I would always be usually the youngest person in the room. And I was taught I had to be authoritarian and talk about my degrees, talk about how many companies I started, how many companies I sold, so forth and so on, get instant respect. And now, as I've gotten older, I sometimes find myself when starting a conversation having verbal diarrhea, as I like to call it, of this is what I've done, this is what I've accomplished, da da da, to set that level. And literally, sometimes I literally have to take a step back, like, I didn't need to say all that. There's no reason that wasn't the time nor place, but it was instilled in me for so long. And when I took my first company public at the age of 31, it was even worse because some people were so dismissive. So that's something where
Mm.
just, 2 ears, one mouth, use them proportionally. And that's something where really over the last couple of years of, hey, people don't need to hear the verbal diarrhea of your background unless they ask for it. So,
Doc
uh,
David, thank you for sharing that because folks, friends with only love in my heart, nobody gives a shit until they believe that you give a shit about them. Period. End of story. How about another
that's
story? Elizabeth, I saw you smiling and kind of nodding. Is there a story that's resonating with you that you'd like to share? Oh, come off mute, please.
Hello. Not quite yet. I'm enjoying this though.
Fair. Hi,
hello,
Nishat. How about
Elizabeth.
you? You got a story you want to share,
Hi,
Nishat?
Dale.
Should the story be personal or professional? Does it?
A
Yes.
story? Pick one. What resonates? What lands for you the most right now in this moment?
Um, in working with clients, I've got a client that their sales team likes to walk into the door and say, we are XYZ company. We have 65 locations across North America. We do this, we do that. It's almost the same experience as what Jordan had. Like they're tone deaf. They don't understand that no one gives a shit about how many locations you have and how great you are.
Yeah.
When you can address their challenges and pain points, like, and I've spun the script on them and said, okay, let's take a different approach when you walk in the door because we literally got shut out 3 times back to back. And it wasn't a I told you so. It was very much quit walking in the door talking about how great you are because nobody cares.
Yeah, that's right. We have to understand from them. Thank you. Thank you, Nishat. Greg, I
Love
saw your
that.
hand.
Yes, it's somewhat similar to yours, but I've told this story over and over, and it revolves around buying a vehicle. And years ago, when we had small kids, Linda and I decided that we were going to buy a minivan. I didn't want a minivan, but it was the right thing for the family. So we walked up there, and me going up to the guy, going, "Okay, we're here to look for a minivan." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, that sounds good. They're really good. They're really," and he's telling us all the stuff. We're walking on the lot, and he looks around me and he looks at Linda and says, "Oh, you're going to be a soccer mom." And I looked at him. I
Wow.
go, "It's for me." And we left. I will never forget that. I'm just like, you know what? Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I ended up getting a truck.
We can do a whole nother workshop on how to avoid shitty assumptions,
Oh, we
right?
can.
Assumptions.
Absolutely.
Dale, why don't you
So,
kick us off? I'm sorry, but I was going to say next topic, but back to you, Dale.
well, we need to do the how and the other
Mm,
parts of the of shut up to level up. But I wanted to share just a comment or a thought on Dr. Dave, your comment. I really appreciate your sharing, Dr. Dave, about presenting your credentials. So one of the things I've learned in the past couple of years as I've gotten older is that there are two types of confidence. There is the confidence that comes from accomplishment, and there is confidence that comes from humility.
mm,
And what I have learned is that the confidence that comes from accomplishment is fake confidence. It's pretty much bullshit. Whereas confidence that comes from humility is real. And it's much more powerful and it makes you much more impactful in your conversations. And I'll tell you why. It's because and I went through this process myself. I used to be, very accomplishment oriented. And then I recognized at one point in my life that I actually don't know shit. As smart as I thought I was, I actually don't know shit. And when you recognize that you don't know shit, that is true humility. And so you tend to approach conversations as a much better listener because you realize you don't know anything. And so you're open to receiving. And that makes you very authentic and genuine. And that sets a different level of conversation. That's a confidence that really appeals to people much more so than starting up with I've had 10 exits and I've got 4 PhDs, right? That's not going to engender trust as much as I am totally open to hearing you.
yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Please
Please.
do,
I think
Bo.
that's great. As you were kind of going through that, I was thinking about like just the social setting. And when I have conversations, not, outside of work with people I'm meeting for the first time, and if their first question to me is like, what do you do for a living? Immediately I'm like, I have no interest in engaging with this person. Like, let's
Right.
try to find something, more like human-like that we can connect on and discuss. And, my friends and my family and folks in the neighborhood, I mean, we talk about that from time to time, but it doesn't define who we are, nor relationships. And generally, you want to shut me down. That's the first question out of your mouth. I'm out of the conversation.
So,
100%.
Bo, what is a juicy question that you would be asked that you would lean into?
I mean, probably anything other than that, honestly. Like what are you into? What do you guys do on the weekend? Like something that's much more personable and less around trying to size somebody up. Because that's what I feel. It's like, what do you do for a living? Let's have a conversation to see kind of where people reside within the pecking order.
Yeah.
Huge
So,
turnoff,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
My
uh,
go-to question I usually ask is in a non-work setting is what's the most unique experience you've had in the last month?
mm,
Because that
Yeah.
tells a lot about someone's personality of what they feel is unique right away.
Good.
I love that. I'll share
Yeah.
just one quick anecdote and then back to you, Dale. I was at a networking event a couple weeks ago, and one guy came up to me, did like this with his business card, and asked me what I did for a living. And I answered it. And then he put his card down and he turned around and he walked away. I was like, wow, so
Wow.
many things. Yeah. Back to
Yeah.
you, Dale.
Yeah. Self-awareness or lack thereof. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of tips on how to shut up to level up, right? So how to have that awareness to speak less. What are some practical tools that you can use? So I'm going to give you a real high level sort of one-liner, and then I'll give you a couple of detail points. The high level is this. So enter every conversation assuming that 50% of what you think you want to say is going to come out naturally through dialogue rather than monologue. Okay, so I'll say it one more time. So just enter the conversation assuming that 50% of what you think that you want to say is going to come out anyway, without you actually saying it. So allow the conversation to happen. And more than likely, all the little bullet points you have in your mind are going to come out anyway. So you don't have to go through your list of 10 bullets when you're speaking. Pick five of them, say that, and then let the other five come out through dialogue. That's kind of the just if I had to give you just one tip for how to be more mindful of how much you're speaking, it's that. So just say less, say half of what you think you need to say. Here are a couple other quick things. So obviously, so get to the point quickly, right? So be succinct. I always like the old Einstein quote. So Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't know it well enough yourself. So keep it simple. And here's the other thing too, is ask a lot of questions and be curious as you enter the conversation. So make the conversation about the other person, not about you. It doesn't matter what you're trying to accomplish. It could be a conversation with your spouse, your kids, or a prospective client. Make the conversation about the other person. I know that you might enter it that way and you might think, well, I'm not going to get what I need. But if you're entering a conversation thinking about what you need, you should be in that conversation to begin with, right? So enter the conversation thinking about the other person more than yourself. And you will probably find that you will tend to listen more and talk less.
Yeah. I'm going to add a juicy Buddha quote. The Buddha quote is this: if your mouth is open, you're not learning and listening. And a Genism to that is, and I believe this with every fiber in my being, listening is as close to loving another human being as you can possibly get to enable others to feel heard and feel significant.
Love it.
All right.
All right.
So let's move on to our next topic, which is let them land before you launch.
Right. So what does that mean? Explain what that means first, Jen, and then I'll go into the psychology.
So I'm going to explain it by sharing a story. And this
Okay.
happened just a couple of weeks ago when I was on site with a client. Okay. Let them land before you launch. Let them land before you launch. And I'm on site and I'm with one VP of sales and his 6 sales directors that report to him. Okay. So I asked the sales directors first, tell me, and I called on one of them by name, share with us what is working in your sales organization and what is broken in your sales organization. And the VP of sales leaned in and launched, took over the conversation and answered the question. Well, keep in mind, the VP is up here, right? The sales directors are on the front line supporting their sellers that are the ones interfacing with prospects pre-sales. But the VP leaned in and launched. So what do you think I observed in that room? What do you think happened in that room? Susan, I see you nodding. What do you think happened? Let them land before you launch. Share with us.
Well, if somebody likes a lot of control, for one thing, and I don't, my guess would be that the sales directors know their place. They just, that,
And thank you, Susan. I apologize. Please complete your
no, that
thought.
was it. That was it.
Thank you, Susan. Phil, I saw you come off mute. What do you got?
Yeah, basically he knows all the answers and they probably have no input on what's working and what is not and what's broken.
Yeah.
So,
You could feel the deflation of the energy in that room in like 3 seconds. That's what happened. So after the VP of sales, why, so what? Why is this relevant? So after the VP finished, I said to him, thank you. His name was Steve. Steve, thank you so much. But I was actually asking Rachel. So I'd love to hear from Rachel now. And then she popped back up with confidence. And then she was able to share her story. Fast forward to the end of the conversation, when all the sales directors are gone, we had a coaching moment with the VP of sales, such that he was able to understand what did he do well and what is a leadership learning moment from him from that scenario in terms of how he basically, Dr. David, I love the way you put it. What did you say? Verbal diarrhea all over his sales team as opposed to giving them the room. Complete. Dale, share with us, what's some of the psychology behind why we interrupt? Why do we do these things?
Okay. Ironically, a lot in common with the previous one, which is sometimes there's an underlying insecurity. There it is again, right? Insecurity. So you might find yourself interrupting because you feel like you're not being heard. And I'll share a story. I have this a little bit goes back to the talking too much. So I've got these two different coaches that I work with. They're basically coach colleagues. They have nothing to do with each other, live in different countries. And they both have this app that is sort of integrated into their Zoom when they're having a Zoom call, and it monitors their conversation. It tells them when they're talking too much. So they actually have the awareness and the desire to improve their conversation because they got this app and put it into their Zoom, and they both told me about it. So ironically, in both has happened two different times with both each of these guys. They were sharing their screen, and so I can see the app, and the app has like this little red light that blinks at them when they're talking too much, and you can set the timer, whatever the time is. And hilariously, they will put a silence when the light is blinking at them, right? They've been talking for 30 seconds and they're still talking. It starts blinking at them, and they'll be like, oh, snooze, and keep talking. Then it starts blinking again, oh, snooze, and they keep talking. And they don't know that I can see because they're sharing the screen. I'm like, dude, what's the point of having the thing if you're going to keep shutting it up when it's telling you talk too much? So, and so anyway, so I got into this with one of them, and what he said was he has from his childhood this feeling of just not being heard. I guess he had parents that were overbearing, and
Mm.
it's that sense that you feel like you're not being heard. Well, that might be true when you were a kid growing up with your parents, but that is not necessarily the case now, right? So just having that awareness of that might be the underlying psychology behind why you're constantly interrupting other people, I think can be very helpful. Another thing, and I forget who it was that talked about assumption before, and we all know about assumption, right? So sometimes we interrupt other people because we're assuming that we know what they're going to say.
Mm.
Raise your hand if you're guilty of that one, right? I'll raise two hands because I'm guilty of that one pretty frequently, right? We assume we know what the other person's going to say. And then that's the first faux pas that we make. But then on top of that, we make it even worse because I know what you're going to say, you're not allowed to talk, right? This is the subconscious thinking that's happening. And so we start talking over them or we interrupt them. I think that's the psychology that you might want to be aware of. At least two different examples is feeling like you're not being heard, sort of be aware of that. And then don't assume you know what the other person's going to say.
Dale,
It's,
question.
yeah, go
Yes.
for it.
Is there ever a justifiable reason to interrupt?
That's a very good question. And I would say, yes, there is.
Well, hold on
So,
one second, please.
yeah,
Jason, what prompted you to ask that question? What do you think?
I don't know. Look, I'm a motor mouth and a hard charger, so I am generally foot on the brake, and that's still too much for most people, but I'm aware of it. But it's just, I like rules of thumb and guardrails. So if
yeah.
Dale said, no, never interrupt, cool, life's gonna live easier.
No, I think sometimes it does make sense to interrupt, right? So, and actually, I'm glad you asked the question because it reminds me of something we didn't say up front, which is so this whole session that we're doing, this whole workshop is oriented around your own behaviors. We're not going to talk a whole lot about how to respond to other people's behaviors. That's the other side of it,
10-4.
right? A conversation has two sides of it. So sometimes you are going to be in a conversation where you're following all the rules, you have all the best habits. The other person's talking too much, like the example I just gave, right? Even the red light's blinking in the dude's face and he's still talking. I think that's a perfectly acceptable scenario in order for you to step in and then interrupt. But there's a way to do it. Right. So I'm not going to tell you the guy's name, but let's just say his name is Tom. So what I've done with Tom is I'll say, hey, Tom, you've said a lot in a short period of time. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So can we maybe slow it down a little bit and let me repeat the last part of what you just said? And I have a question. So you maybe kind of break it up a little bit in the guise of let's make sure that we have good, clear communication. And so that's for most people, that'll usually be enough of a cue for them to chill it out. That's one example.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Jason. I'm going to add an example that I use that is, I've never heard a no, and it is diffusing of any potential tension as well. And it is asking for permission. And I do this all the time at home, with family, with friends, and with my clients. And part of it is setting the expectation up front. Hey, what is it that you want to accomplish? All right, what gets to happen? So it's a good use of time. And may I have your permission to interrupt you for clarity? And I always go with clarity, even though I know if this person just talking off the rails, I'm visiting other planets and it's just going to spiral out of control. So asking for permission to interrupt for clarity is a way of diffusing any tension. And I have never been told no. I've been told I may not answer the question that you're going to ask after you interrupt, but permission to interrupt you for clarity. Try that.
So my anxiety around interrupting is more, I'm afraid I'm going to forget what I'm going to say about a point that somebody makes while they're talking, especially if they are a talker. And so, and I've tried to not interrupt, but lo and behold, get to the end and it's like, oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say, and I'm like, oh, that was a good point, and then I usually wind up having to come back to it later, and by then it's too late, and so that's a lot of where my anxieties come from with that.
So,
So go
sorry,
ahead, Jeremy.
Dale. Thank you. Super quick. Raise your hand if you have the gifted brain of ADD. I do. So does everyone in my
Nope.
family. And that's very common. So it depends, like to Dale's point, is it ever appropriate to interrupt? Jason, great question. Know your audience. Who is in the conversation with you? When my son interrupts me a bunch of times, it's not because he's being rude or disrespectful. It's his gifted brain. His brain is going 3x faster than his mouth can get the words out. So I know that. So that gets to be on me to be annoyed by it or to allow it to lean in and continue to build a loving relationship. So I'm saying that, Jeremy, to give yourself grace. And, also sometimes he keeps a little notepad or he'll grab a notepad on his phone to make a little note so he doesn't forget the topic, which also makes for a clumsy conversation. But it is what it is with a gifted brain of ADD. That's an option.
Yeah, that's kind of, it's like the former. It's That's kind of hard to do in a business discussion or relationship. I do try to take notes here and there, but that's harder to do when you're in person in a meeting or whatever. On a Zoom call, it's easy. You can do that, but in person, obviously, that's a lot harder.
So Jeremy, let me ask you this. In those occasions, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I go through the same thing. So, but let me ask you this. In those occasions where you have forgotten to say something, you thought of the point, you restrained yourself from interrupting, and then you thought to yourself, I'll get to it later. The conversation ended, the Zoom call is off, then you're like, oh shit, I forgot to say that thing. In those scenarios, let me ask you this. What percentage of those were material to the outcome of the conversation?
I don't have an answer for that. Just it's hard to kind of think back to enough conversations to put a percentage behind it, but I would say maybe not as, and I know exactly that's where you were going with this. Maybe not as material to the conversation, but material to me understanding.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the key messages we hope that we leave with you guys today is, so what makes a great conversation? And we'll send you a PDF. Everybody's going to get like a playbook after this. I think it says in the playbook. A definition of a great conversation is where both parties exit the conversation thinking to themselves, I can't wait to speak to that person again. So if you have a great conversation and you end the conversation, you know you're going to speak to that person again, you will have a second chance to make that point or to get that clarity, right? So don't assume that the conversation only has, if it's a 30-minute Zoom call, if you're doing it right, you'll have another 30-minute Zoom call or whatever it is. You'll have another meeting, another coffee meeting. You're going to have another conversation with your wife and your kids. It's okay if you don't get it out in the first conversation. It can come back. So that's my general sort of thought to it is just trust, be more oriented towards the ultimate outcome of the conversation as opposed to the details of it, and just kind of trust that it's going to come out. And that might actually even improve your memory. So if you go in with this, I know the outcome is going to get where I want to, that might actually improve your ability to remember to bring it up before the Zoom call is over.
Jeremy, I'm feeling pulled to share a tactical approach as well, which is write that word down. If you're in a meeting, likely you have the ability to take notes, maybe. Um, Write that word or phrase down. And it's perfectly fine to say at the end of the conversation, hey, before we go, can we circle back? I forgot to say X and Y, which I do all the time, or follow up in an email. So if it's relevant to Dale's point, how relevant was it? Or was it that you needed or wanted to be heard or to feel significant in that moment?
Yeah, I
So
was gonna
we've got
say
some
And
options.
it does tie back a lot to the very first point you guys made with the shut up. portion, the very that anxiety. So, it's definitely layers of anxiety for sure in conversation.
It's something I deal with some veterans, and almost every veteran I deal with in business carries a small little notebook. And before starting, it was like, "Hey, do you mind if I write down notes?" And they literally, like literally a small little pocket handbook that goes like if like almost like a chest protector. And they're old school, and they write down notes, and that's a trick I do, especially when I go to networking events, and people are talking and talking and talking. So that could also maybe be a little trick for you too, Jeremy. I literally have a bunch of small little notebooks like yay big, and I literally just write down little blurbs to remember. And you'd be amazed when people are like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for writing that down." If anything, it actually helps with some of my networking in my business. And I learned that trick from veterans, actually.
Yeah, I'm a fractional CISO and CIO, and it's when I'm having conversations with clients, it and maybe this is just a me thing, but it would be not weird, I think, but very analog for me to pull out a notebook, right? But yeah, I do have an e-notebook that I should really start carrying around a little more, for sure.
Jeremy, thank you. You allowed us to go have a juicy conversation. So thank you for your question. Susan, I see your hand. Go for it. Oh, please come off mute.
I do it all the time in terms of just writing down, like when I'm talking with people in a one-on-one, I'm a writer for one thing. And there's just that connection between the brain and your hand when you're writing down notes about people. And it helps me to be able to retain the information a little bit better.
Love it. Thank you, Susan. Okay, Dale, pick us back up. We are talking about let them land before you launch.
Right. So don't interrupt, right? That's the bad habit that we're talking about here is interrupting other people when they're talking. So again, same format as last time. I'm going to give you a high level and then a couple of detailed bullets. So the high level is the cure for it, how to avoid interrupting. View every conversation as an opportunity to learn. So here's the thing. When you are talking, you're not learning anything. You're not really growing yourself or advancing yourself as a human being, as a fractional CIO, whatever, when you're talking, right? On the other hand, when you're listening, you are moving yourself forward, right? You're learning something. And here's something that I have gotten awareness of just in the past couple of years. So as I started coaching back in 2019 and just increasing my self-awareness, I used to be very much not self-aware. Now I'm much better about it. In the past, I did the math earlier today. So in the past 6 months, I have had about 350 conversations, professional conversations. This doesn't include conversations with family and friends. So just on a professional level, I've had about 350 one-on-one conversations in the past 6 months. And what I learned in those 350 conversations is everybody has something interesting to say. And when you approach a conversation that way, then you're going to be much more inclined to listen rather than talk. So the inclination to interrupt will be much diffused. So it's just enter the conversation with the intention of learning something, being curious, rather than just making it about yourself. So, and remember too, listening is kind of a process. So I like to think about listening as not just hearing, but it's listening to understand. So how does that work? How do you listen to understand? My tip is absorb the information, right, when you're present. In other words, don't be thinking about other stuff. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say in response. Quiet the mind and listen and absorb the information. Then put the information in the perspective of the other person. So to the extent that you can, try to forecast what that person's background is, what their experience is, how they mean the words that they said, because oftentimes how we understand language is different from how another person understands language. So listening is really about that process of hearing what they're saying, putting yourself in their shoes, and then trying to understand. And then of course you can always reaffirm and ask, I like to repeat back what they said to confirm that I understood what they said. So really, that's just kind of the tip is um, be conscientious in listening and view every conversation as an opportunity to learn.
And I'm going to add to that how to be curious. When I feel myself wanting to launch, to lean in and launch, but, me, what can I say or how do I show up such that I am exhibiting curiosity about the person in front of me? And it completely changes the dynamic. To the point in the beginning of the conversation, what's an effective conversation is that back and forth engagement where both of us walk away thinking, I want to have this conversation again with Jen because it was so great. Be curious. Let's do not gloss over the word curiosity. David, I would love to hear from you. Did you have a question earlier or something you wanted to share?
Did not have a question or something I want to share, but I love the listening to learn.
Well, thank you for saying so. Very good. Okay, back to you, Dale. Did you have an anecdote or a story you wanted to share with us?
Actually, should we do a little comic interlude?
Perfect. Let's do it.
Would you guys like a little bit of comedy, sort of lighten? Okay, I'm gonna share a little skit from SNL. This is an SNL skit. I couldn't tell you what time frame of SNL it was. It's not old school SNL like when we were kids, but it's pretty good nonetheless. This is going to illustrate a good point. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, actually, hold on. I forgot to share sound. Sorry. Let me also share the sound. Here we go. I'll do maybe about a minute and a half of this. It won't be too long.
Everyone, welcome to traffic school. I know a lot of you don't want to be here, but need I remind you, you're all here because you messed up.
This ought to be fun.
Yeah, I hear that.
I can probably hear you better just because I have really good ears. So. I was in a listening contest this morning. So I came in first and second. So I just have really big eardrums, probably bigger than yours.
Hi. I know it's been a while since you've all been in school, but if you want to talk, you have to raise your hand.
Actually, I was in school this morning. So just to go to school all the time, go to school on the weekends. So it hasn't been that long for me. So I just came from there. I just came from school.
Excuse me. What was your name?
Penelope.
Well, Penelope, if we don't get started, we'll be here till Tuesday.
That's my favorite band from the 80s. Got all their CDs and everything.
Great, great. My name is Regina. As you know, we will be together for 9 full hours today.
Excuse me, can you tell me when the breaks are gonna be? Because I have to pick up my 7-year-old daughter from her piano lesson.
I have to pick up my 6-year-old daughter, so 1 year younger than yours, so she'll probably just live a little bit longer than you. She's teaching piano, so she also teaches horns and computers and guitars and Spanish.
To answer your question, we will have an hour for lunch and a couple of 15-minute breaks throughout the day. Now, I'd like to have you all tell each other why you're here. Jim, why don't you start?
Well, I had an accident. My insurance rates went through the roof.
I went through the roof too, so they were just really high. I went around the roof and inside of it.
Very good.
Yes. So I think you guys get the point from that. What are some reactions you guys have to that? I'm just curious because I think there were a couple of things going on there.
The
Chris
classic.
Ramirez. Sorry, Jason. I would love to
No.
hear from Chris.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you,
Hey,
Jen.
Chris.
You too.
Yeah, sure, I'll react. I think there's maybe some unnecessary interjections. I don't think she let anybody land before she was launching.
Right.
Take these home to Amanda and to Romy the homie.
Amanda didn't need it, but my son
One-upmanship,
certainly
huh?
could.
Sorry.
Jason, back to you. And then Samir. Jason.
I was just gonna say it's the classic one-upper.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yes.
Samir, what were you
Love
going to
it.
say?
Exactly the same thing. Well said.
Yeah. And so that one, yeah, we've all had the tendency to do that, and I think if we're to talk about the psychology behind that, again, I think that just goes back to there's a strong insecurity slash me orientation, a little bit of selfishness, definitely making it more about you than it is about the other person.
So we're just coming off Thanksgiving, and I feel compelled to share a little aha moment I had sitting around the Thanksgiving table with a bunch of really strong women in my family. And one of my aunts started asking my daughter, Jordan, what's it like being a freshman in college? A very broad, open-ended question, allowing Jordan to lean in and start talking. About 15 seconds after Jordan started to talk, my aunt said, well, what's your favorite subject? So then Jordan pivoted and started to answer that question. And then my mom leaned in and said, well, why is that your favorite subject? And then Jordan started answering that question. And then my second aunt leaned in and said, what do you think about the weather? Have you had any tornadoes? And this whole dialogue, maybe it was 3 minutes, but you could see Jordan, with every interruption, this conversational ping pong, that she began to deflate a little bit more and more and more. So the aha moment that I had was, holy shit, I come from a long line of people who interrupt. And how does that serve the person in front of me? So something to keep in mind as we're talking about let them land before you launch.
All right.
Sorry, I have a question.
Please.
We are talking about us ourselves that we need to wait before people until the people finish. But what we should do when we are in a conversation with someone who's interrupting us, keep interrupting us, when we should quit, or what we should do in that situation.
So I'll take a stab at that, at least from the familial perspective. I said, wow, are we all aware of how much we interrupt? And that led to an interesting discussion about what is emotional intelligence. And also, one person said, I don't care that I interrupt. That's how my brain works. And if you don't like it, don't engage. So now, in a professional setting, because remember, we can only control ourselves. So, Fateh, please say your name correctly.
It's Paquette.
No,
Fateh,
sorry, B. I
it's
was
right.
talking to Fateh over here.
That makes more sense.
Was your name pronounced correctly, Fateh?
Yeah, that's Fateh, correct.
Okay, good. So I would like to pose the question to anyone in the room. What do you do when you're in a professional setting and the person you're talking to consistently interrupts you? How do you handle it? Who is our brave, bold leader volunteer? Bo, go for it.
I interrupt people all the time. I feel like that's my job, to be honest with you. So I've got a different opinion on that. And when people continue to interrupt me, I just kind of like just one more, just hold on and kind of try to finish my thought. But it's part of conversation, it happens. And some people are way too long-winded.
Thank you, Bo. Who else? Who's got
when someone in a business setting, if someone keeps doing that and they ask a bunch of questions, I say, you know what? Great. I'm gonna give one word answers from now on. And all of a sudden people go, what? Why I gotta be like that? Why I gotta be a jerk? Well, if you want to keep interrupting, I'll just give a one word answer. And then it makes people think and shift it back onto them and say, wow, maybe I should change my approach. And that one tends to work really well because then they're like, why are you only giving one word answers? Because I'm getting asked 5 different questions and you don't want to hear my entire thoughts. So, or I joke around and I tell them, have you heard the 10-second rule? They go, what's that? I go, well, wait for me to respond for 10 seconds before you ask your next question.
Ooh,
nice.
That is a nice pro tip.
I think it definitely depends on the situation, right? I think Bo has a point that sometimes it is just a natural part of conversation. And so I think there is an acceptable level of interrupting. But it can definitely go overboard. And so like Fateh, like my answer to your question would be a couple things, sort of along the lines of what Dr. David was saying, is I would try to I would at first just allow it to happen, and maybe try to figure out what is really going on behind the scenes for that person, right? So maybe try to understand a little bit of their underlying psychology. Why are they interrupting? And then if it persists, and what I might do is I might myself interrupt and say, I notice you've interrupted me quite a few times. I was kind of wondering, how can I communicate differently, or what is it, just ask them, like, what is it that is not going right about this conversation that you keep interrupting me? Am I not answering your questions thoroughly enough? Am I not being clear? And really just kind of put it out there. And hopefully, if the person is mature enough and professional enough, they will, respond in a professional and mature manner.
And if and when they don't, that's on them, not you. That's the difference. Right. You can control your reaction. Are you reacting or are you responding? That 10-second pause enables you to respond versus a knee-jerk react.
Right.
Great questions. Who else has a question or a story to share? Bo, then Jason.
This is kind of the inverse of the conversation. so far I've got a guy on my team. I really appreciate him. He's a good guy, does good work product, but he'll call you randomly, and if you engage, you cannot get off the phone in like less than 3 minutes. Usually the conversations are 15 to 30 minutes. The thoughts are not well organized, very long-winded. I've started basically saying, "Hey, I've got 2 minutes. That's it." But then I feel like I'm a jerk because I don't ever have enough time for him, right? But then I don't have enough time to have a 30-minute conversation, so I'm continuously interrupting him because it just goes all over the place, and it makes me feel bad, and it's not a good environment. So any thoughts on like how to mitigate that a little bit, just to kind of pump the brakes, because it's bad.
Send him the recording to this workshop.
So
Go
I'll
ahead,
take a
Jen.
step. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Dale, I'll yield the mic over to you. Um, I call it setting the table. So what does that mean? When you are having someone over to your home for a meal, Bo, what are the thoughts that go through your head in preparation of setting your table? And I'm asking you,
Oh,
and it's
literally.
not rhetorical. Yes, please share. What's your process when you're having people over to your home for a meal?
Sure. Use a coaster. Wait for everybody to be seated before you start eating, and offer to help clean up, even though I'm going to do it all. That's it.
Okay. Excellent. I appreciate that. That's
Yeah.
brevity. That's brevity. Someone else might say, well, if we're going to sit down by 7 p.m., I'm going to work my way backwards, which means what time am I going to the grocery store? Am I going to the grocery store or the farmer's market? How many hours do I need for prepping, for chopping? Do I have all the right dishes and serving utensils? When do I want my table to be set?
Okay.
So, what I'm trying to display here is you are high level, fast, give me bullet points. And if
Yes.
the guy on your team is the much more detailed, set that expectation so that you remove the friction from your conversation. And that can look like sometimes I'll have 30 minutes carved out for you, but
Yeah.
sometimes I may only have 5 minutes. So how can you prepare so that when we only have 5 minutes, that you're able to communicate what it is that you need to communicate with me and we can have a productive conversation. Setting the table.
I love that because I am very high level. I'm not detailed. I don't want to know the details nor go down any wormholes. So I
And he
appreciate
may,
that.
good, and he may not pick up on that. So that's on you to communicate with him what is the best way for you to be present for an effective conversation.
Cool. Thank you.
My pleasure. Was there Jason and then
Dr.
Dr. David?
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I was just going to add, as part of my journey, there's been a lot of self-awareness and discovery along the way. And two things that really struck me as insane at the time. One was a coach once said, sometimes the best course of action is to do nothing, which I'm action oriented, man. Like, what? But I was in a high stakes meeting in my late 20s with a service provider. And what I didn't realize was happening, I screwed up the whole meeting because my VP was intentionally asking very uncomfortable questions. And as soon as he stopped, I filled the void because I was uncomfortable. So
Mm.
one thing I've learned, silence is a very effective weapon. Because if you just sit there and let it hang, it's amazing what people will just start dumping out on the table.
Such a pro tip, Jason. Dr. David and then Phil,
Very
I saw
good.
you come off mute. Go for it, Doc Dave.
What I was going to say was, I'm not the biggest reader, but one of my favorite authors in business is Dan Kennedy, the No Bullshit series, No BS. He has a book called Time Management. The guy still uses faxes to this day to communicate. So what you say about serving the table and about dealing with an employee who kind of just takes so much of your time. If you're looking for a really good read about time management for your employees, people that do that, the Dan Kennedy No BS Time Management. It's extremely blunt, extremely raw, but his techniques work. That's all I was going to say. If you're looking for this happens a lot to a lot of so.
Thank you, Doc Dave. Phil, you're up, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of second what Jason said. I mean, from a sales perspective or, any type of consulting perspective, when you're asking questions, I love it when people just keep blabbing because they reveal so much, and then you get your questions to dive deeper just by listening to them. Just keep going and going and going. Not always, but but most of the time. And then I have a buddy who tells his people, be brief, be bright, be gone. He's like, I don't have 45 minutes to talk to you.
I had a boss, a VP of sales, who did not believe in one-on-ones. And your time, our time as reps with him was when he was walking from one end of the hall to the other or going to another floor. And he would say, all right, Halpern, you got 30 seconds. What do you got? And so that taught me to be extremely bullet point. Here's the problem. Here's my recommended solution. Are you cool with that? Boom, done. And that was it. But I learned from him. He never actually said, this is how I communicate. All right. Back to you, Dale. Where are we?
So I just wanted to add one comment to Bo's point is my guess is if you have this experience with this guy, probably other people do too. So I do think if you were to address the issue with him in obviously in a thoughtful way, you would probably be doing him a service. Now, there is something to be said for speaking briefly, like as Jen just pointed out. But the thing about life I've learned in general is that nothing is ever 100% this or 100% that, right? The truth always lies somewhere in the middle. There's always a balance to things. There's always moderation. So there are times in which you do need to be able to speak brief and to the point. There are times when someone needs to, you need to let someone speak a little bit more to get more information. But there's sort of a balance. And so my advice for this guy that you're talking about, Bo, might be is try to maybe find a way to meet him in the middle. Maybe you do sit him down and in a very thoughtful way as you express that he might be better off by learning to be a little bit more brief and getting his thoughts, especially if you're finding that his thoughts are kind of messy and disorganized. We are all going to benefit from being more thoughtful about our communications. You're probably going to be helping him at home with his family. You're going to be helping him with his coworkers. You're going to be helping him in general. So I think it would be probably a good thing to bring it up with him.
That's maybe your next session, how to have hard conversations, right?
Right.
I love it.
Thanks for that.
And break through assumptions.
Right. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to the next topic.
I love it. Let's rock and roll.
Jen,
Okay.
you want to introduce it?
I'm happy to. So our next topic is topic number 3. This is our final topic, which is read the room. Don't ignore the cues. Read the room. And I want to start by illustrating a short story, and then Dale, I'll turn it over to you for the psychology behind it. Was recently on a cruise with 4,000 passengers and 1,000 crew. And the folks that I was traveling with, this guy, who's a very dear friend of mine, believes every human being must be seen and heard and is just the nicest, kindest, warmest human ever. And what he observed on our 7-day cruise is how often human beings, we would disregard the crew or the staff when they are trying to ask us, if you're in a restaurant on the cruise, what do you want to drink? Or what are you going to order? And it was a lot of, give me this, give me that, get the salt, I need a new napkin. And he observed by reading the physical responses of the staff, how crushing it was to the staff. The staff were treated like servants as a general rule of thumb. And JJ, my buddy, just being who he is, reading the room and observing the treatment of the passengers to the crew, every time a wait person or staff walked up to our table, he would look at their name tag. And typically on this cruise, a lot of them were from the Philippines with American names. And he would say, Sean, hi there. Thank you for taking care of me and my friends. How long you been working here? Oh, great. Is this your first time working on a cruise? Okay. What did you love about the previous cruise versus this cruise? How's this cruise going? Do you get time off? Like not stacking, but engaging this individual with authenticity and observing that the crew member's body language would open up and they would smile. And how do we know this to be true? Because guess whose drink got served first everywhere we went on the ship? Guess whose plate arrived first every time we sat down at a restaurant? Guess who learned his name? Every crew member that we'd walk by, they would learn his name. Hello, Mr. JJ. Good morning, Mr. JJ, the entire time. So what's the takeaway from that? What's the takeaway? Elizabeth, I saw you smiling. Share with us. What's the takeaway? Read the room. What do you think?
You are on mute, Elizabeth. There you go.
Sorry about that. That is so perfect that you mentioned that scenario. It's just being civil.
Civility. It's just being civil to another human being. And look at the reaction. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Any other thoughts? Jason, I saw you nodding.
I was just gonna say, my dad is a cruiser and they go on different boats. It can be a year or two apart, but because he's really nice to them, they remember him by name.
Look how simple that was. He's nice to them.
That's it.
He's nice to them. Doc David, you got it.
So something they teach you in physical therapy school when you're talking to patients, which I don't think we're taught enough in sales, is the very simple acknowledgement rule. When someone asks you a question, the first thing you do is you acknowledge them. Thank you for asking me that. I appreciate your help. You acknowledge them first as a human being, as a person, then you continue on. And the acknowledgement rule shows that you are paying attention to the person or to the individual. Yes, I think it's literally, but it's the acknowledgement rule. Like just you have to acknowledge. When someone asks you a question, acknowledge them first instead of answering your answer right away. And that goes a long way. So yeah.
Thanks, Doc Dave. Dale, back to you, sir.
Okay, so reading the room, obviously, I think this is clear by now, but what we mean by that is, be observant of the other person's sort of facial expressions or body language, kind of like what's going on for that person, especially when you're on the boat, as the example that Jen gave. Like when I go into a grocery store, for example, and I interact with somebody, whether it's the deli counter or whatever, the first thing they might say to me might be, "Hey, what can I do for you?" And I'll be like, "Oh, how are you?" I'll sort of change, and especially if I read that, maybe they're in a bad mood, they've had a rough day, they're tired, they're stressed out. That just sort of being aware of where the other person is, and then adjusting accordingly, right? So adjusting the way you converse with them accordingly. So why do we not do this? What is the psychology behind the bad side of this? When we fail to do this, what is the psychology? Well, again, it's a common theme. It is a little bit too much focus on self, maybe, rather than on the other, right? So the idea being that make the conversation about the other person, not yourself. But it's very easy to slip into that self-orientation in our conversations. The other thing too, I think, is sometimes we basically just forget the connection between what we're saying and how the other person is reacting, right? We might get so engrossed in what we are saying that we become blind to the person's reactions, right? So, like right here on the Zoom call, I see Phil kind of leaning in, right? And that to me is a good sign, right? Like I've said something to draw to draw Phil in. If you're on your Zoom call or in person and you see people, so all of a sudden they're doing my phone, they're doing this, they're looking away, or maybe they get up and they kind of do this, and that tells you something, right? That tells you that maybe what you're saying is not holding their attention. Okay, so how do you do it? How do you become more aware of the other person's body language? How do you read the cues? So the number one highlight for this one, I think, is to remember that in a conversation, it is not on the other person to understand you. It's not their job to understand you. It is your job to be understandable. So just enter the conversation that way, right? So if I have a message I want to convey, it's my job to convey it in a way that that person understands it. It's not their responsibility to just understand me. In order to accomplish that, I need to be aware of how I am landing. I need to monitor and be cognizant of their facial expressions and their body language. Do they give you, watch their eyebrows, watch their mouth, right? Because you will be aware of how it's landing. If you start to see that they're having those funny facial expressions, then that's your cue that you need to change your angle, change direction. So sort of course correct to be sure you're captivating and capturing your audience.
I'd like to add also, and then Jason, excuse me, we'll hear from you. But when it is that obvious, because we are becoming better at reading the room, pause and ask, are we tracking? What question do you have about what you heard? Can you tell me what you just heard? Leaders, raise your hand if you're a leader of other human beings on this call. Some of you will raise your hands. Yeah. Make no assumptions. Ask your teams, ask your leadership team. Hey, are we tracking? What did you hear me say? What are your 3 biggest takeaways from this meeting? Ask, do not assume. We're often in the habit of telling, but ask. Jason, back to you.
Yeah, I'm not a big reader, but on this topic, I read a book probably 10 or 15 years ago, written by a former FBI interrogator called What Everybody Is Saying.
Mm.
And it was like, it blew my mind. Half of it was realizing I was doing it wrong. But you talk about reading a room, like the way you fold your hands, the way they cross their legs, the way they're sitting when we're talking. Like I know if they're engaged or not, and if they're angry or not, if I'm annoying. Like that book was a simple read, and it was like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for
It's huge.
sharing. James, permission to hear from you. Do you have a story about reading the room that you'd like to share with us?
Hello.
Hi.
I'll do that. Thanks for asking that question, which acknowledges you and stalls for time as I'm thinking. No, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes, I mean, it's obviously it's apparent when somebody else is bad at something. Like how can that person not read the room? But a lot harder to be self-aware. You know, like when am I ignoring clues I should be picking up on? Um, yeah, so I mean, if you have any advice there.
So I'll tell you this. This is one I've got a quote on the whiteboard in my office that my coach taught me, and it's this: being self-aware is my most important work every day for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
So when I am cognizant of that, and I'll read it again, being self-aware is my most important work every day for the rest of my life. And it is a work in progress. When I feel triggered or I'm leaning in or I catch myself interrupting, the good sign is I catch myself. I'm aware that I'm triggered. I'm aware that I'm interrupting. And then I can pause, or I'm aware that I'm not reading the room, that the guy I'm trying to have a conversation with is all closed. But when I get myself out of it, then I can engage. So you just mentioned that the awareness and stepping into self-awareness, observe people around you, and then you might be able to start observing it in yourself.
Yeah, I did have one case, a sales call a couple weeks ago that I really beat myself up on afterwards because I picked the guy was in the middle of a software transition and he fired the people who were doing it and needed help getting the new system up and running. And it's one I knew. And I asked him at one point, like, um, are you trying to do it line for line, bringing the old code into the new system? Or do you just want to get the functionality working in the new system? And his answer to that was, um, if we had more time, we could do a full redesign, but we're under pressure. And what I perceived at that moment was like, okay, he thinks that changing it would take more time. But the reason I'm asking it is that you might get to the answer, you might get a working solution faster that way. And I didn't acknowledge it. I perceived he had this misconception, like his concept of why I was asking was the opposite of what I was trying to convey. I perceived that and I did not correct him on it. And I didn't get the thing. So like, I guess that's a weird situation where like I was perceiving it, but I did not act on it.
Permission to challenge you, James?
Please.
So you may circle back with him and have that conversation. Begin to set the table.
Yeah. I've tried reaching out to him by email a couple of times and explaining, but yeah, the ship sailed.
Okay, fair enough. Lesson learned. So for next time, perhaps get in front of it next time.
Indeed.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Dale, do you want to do a role play about this particular topic?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So we are doing a role play on reading the room. Don't ignore the cues. And it's also applicable to the other two topics, but let's go. Dale. Okay, Dale, tell me about a vacation you recently went on. Tell me what's happening. Where'd you go?
Yeah, so my son and I started, this was back in the summer. My son and I went on a what the Boy Scouts call a high adventure trip.
Oh my
So high
God.
adventure
I was
means
in Girl Scouts and I was a brownie. That was an amazing experience. I sold a lot of cookies. Okay, yeah, back to you.
so high adventure means it's more rigorous. It's outdoors for a period of time. There might be some danger involved. It's a little bit more strenuous on the body. So that's what they call high adventure. So this one was on the New River in West Virginia,
Oh my God, West
which is a
Virginia.
gorgeous
I
river.
love John Denver and the Blue Ridge Mountains. Do you like John Denver? Anyway, I'm sorry, back to you.
John Denver did come up on the trip, as you might think. So we had about 8 dads and about 16 boys. It was a great trip. We were on the river for 6 days, camping on the side of the river overnight in tents
Oh my
and
God,
sleeping
how many
bags.
ticks and mosquitoes? Holy moly, holy sugar. That just must have been a nightmare.
You know,
Okay.
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. There really weren't a whole lot of insects, because I guess the weather was right for it. But we had a great time, and one of the best parts was, seeing the way the boys sort of worked together to solve problems, the way they sort of looked out after had each other's back.
Yeah.
I had responsibility for more than just my own son, and so that was a bit of a new experience, and it was just a great trip.
Amazing. Okay. So what did you all observe that was intentional and exaggerated? What did you observe? Fateh, tell us, what did you observe? Or he was saying goodbye. Anyone?
I think he was just signing off.
There were a
Jason.
lot. Oops.
Oh, Jason, then Greg. Thanks, Greg. Go for it, Jason.
You weren't following the rules.
What rules are those?
You were interrupting and launching and all the stuff you were just telling us not to do.
And I was ignoring the fact or oblivious to the fact that Dale had a story he really wanted to share. And watching Dale's face, reading your cues, Dale, and listening to your tone of voice and how you leaned in and your face got animated, that story was very important to you. And either I didn't care or I was oblivious because I was making it about me. As opposed to, Dale, if you'll play with me, let's do it again, and I'll share some question asking where we're making it all about Dale.
So this was earlier in the summer. My son and I went on what the Boy Scouts call a high adventure trip. And so high adventure means that it's an outdoor sort of excursion over a longer period of time. There is a lot of physical activity. You're outdoors. There may be some
Mm.
danger, some skill levels required. There's usually a minimum age requirement for these trips for the Boy Scouts. And so this particular trip was on the New River in West Virginia. So
Mm.
we were kayaking and whitewater rafting for 6 days, camping overnight, carrying our gear, the whole 9 yards. We had absolutely no contact with the outside world. There was no cell signal. There were no devices. We were left
Wow.
basically up to our own to survive for the 6 days, and it was a fantastic trip.
Mm. What was the highlight for you for this trip?
So I think the highlight, so the boats that we were on, the crafts that we were on are called duckies. They're these inflatable crafts, inflatable kayak, basically. It's one man per kayak. One of the activities they engaged in was to do a ducky stack. So you're in the middle of a river, and the river has flowing water, and it's deep. You can't stand up in it. So the goal was to reach 10 duckies stacked crisscross to get them as high as possible. And imagine yourself, how do you do that? And these are very large. They were probably, I don't know, 15 foot, 12 to 15 footers in length. And the boys actually managed to hit the goal. So they got 10 duckies stacked in the middle of the river. And that was pretty, so to watch them
Yeah.
organize themselves and to watch them have that sort of teamwork and actually get the job done
Mm.
when it's obviously very difficult to do, was cool. That was the highlight, I think.
So how did you communicate to them, to the boys, how impressed you were by the feats that they had accomplished? Because you seem like a proud papa and a proud uh, uh, guide or participant. So how did you communicate that to the boys?
So at the end of every day on our troop does this on any camp out. At the end of every day, we go through roses and thorns. So we
Mm.
review the day with the boys, and we go around the room essentially around the campfire, and everybody gets to talk about their roses and thorns, the highlights and lowlights for the day. So that night, actually, I wasn't the only dad that was proud of them, but a couple of us dads pointed that out as one of our biggest, roses of the day. And it's just about reminding them the importance of being able to work with each other and have each other's backs, and to think outside the box and to problem solve together.
Okay, role play complete. What did you learn about Dale? Greg, go for it. I saw you come off mute.
Well, I mean, what I learned there, and really the difference between the two things. Well, number one, Dale's extremely proud about what he did, but you caused him to get more excited about it because the questions were about you. Tell me about what you observed, what you were proud, and you and you and you versus, oh yes, I went on that on a Girl Scout thing. It was all about him.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could see him getting excited about it, whether or not it did sound like a fictional story, but he got excited and he wanted to tell you more. And he can't wait to talk to you again.
Yeah, that's a completely different experience in terms of the conversation, isn't it?
Yes.
Totally.
Dale, how did that feel? How did the first role play feel versus the second role play?
Well, my observation right off the bat, I noticed this, is in the second case, I was able to tell more details that I thought were important to the story than in the first case, right? In the first case, I felt like I was limited in what I could convey. But in the second case, I gave you much more of the story, because I had the space to actually communicate. And the parts of the story that I didn't get to say in the first case were pretty, in my estimation, pretty important parts of the story. So I
That's
felt like
excellent.
I felt more complete, much more complete.
Amazing. And we all learned some key things about you, Dale. That was awesome. Okay,
Yeah,
I do
thanks for
want to
that.
keep us time accountable. We've got about 11 minutes maximum left. So, Dale,
Yes, do you want to do, so let's go back and look at our agenda. So I think we have debriefs and takeaways, and then
yeah,
we will give you guys an opportunity to have one of your conversations audited or assessed by us. But do you want to do the debrief first?
I'm happy to. All right. So, from a takeaway perspective, when we're in conversation with other people, keep in mind what's in it for them. It's not about you until you've given or proven the value of the product or service that you may bring. What's in it for them? It's not about me until I know what's in it for them. Be curious. If there's one word takeaway that one thing that you take away from this in the form of one word, pretend you hear Dale and Jen in your ears. Be curious. Be curious about them. What do I need to say or do to be curious about them? And then lastly, by being curious, you will then observe and experience when the people you're talking to lean in. It builds and engenders more trust, and your prospects, your friends, neighbors, but from a business standpoint, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And people buy from people they know, like, and trust because you make them feel significant. So that's from a debrief perspective. For the folks and good on y'all for making it through till the end. Let's go around the room and I'd love to hear, Dale and I would love to hear one or two takeaways from this workshop conversation on how to avoid shitty conversations. And if we could keep it 60 seconds more or less, one or two takeaways. Jason, you first. I see you first on screen, please.
Two things. First one, I like the asking for permission from the gate outset on onset. That's huge. And this has been helpful to validate that the work I'm doing is in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Jason. James, then Doc David.
Yeah, I think two things I need to focus on are interrupting and the one-upping. And I'm not as bad as the video clip. But I need to keep that in mind, and I need to be self-aware. And yeah, I've got a networking event coming up next week, so I'm going to try to actively be thinking about that as I'm engaging in these conversations there. Thanks.
Thank you, James. And I challenge you, ask 3 questions about the person that's in front of you, a minimum of 3 questions before you launch into anything about James.
Okay, we'll do. Thank you.
Dr. David, then Jeremy.
Right off the bat, I thought it was really cool, interesting, great to have a group of people that showed some vulnerability and like, hey, this is a problem I deal with, and the fact we can share as a group because doesn't always happen on a webinar. So kudos to both of you. And the biggest takeaway was learn a few new things, as I like to call them green nuggets. I learned a few new green nuggets, and a few green nuggets I already knew, which is more positive reinforcement. So kudos to both of you. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thank you, Dr. David.
participation. Yeah, thank you, Doc Dave. All right, Jeremy, then Elizabeth, then Greg.
Honestly, I came off mute just to tell James, you just got to hit the button behind you.
What button is that?
The old school, that was easy.
The easy button. Got it.
Easy button. Awesome.
But beyond that, a lot of what was discussed here, basically what Dr. Dave just said was, I've heard before, and I know what my anxieties are, and I know what I need to do, and I think it's just hearing it again, hearing the reinforcement, and remembering what I need to do when I need to do it. So, and yeah, I think maybe hearing Jen and Dale in my ears during the conversations might help.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. I forgot who I said. Elizabeth, then Greg.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dale and Jen, for your insights. I think I'm going to just take away a lot of this, just kind of a refresher, but mainly just to go away with confidence, with humility.
That is
Beautiful.
a powerful phrase. Yes. Thank you, Elizabeth. Greg, and then Gerald. Gerald, if you are with us and want to share. Greg.
This was very interesting to me. As you know, I'm pretty much deaf. I wear hearing aids, and knowing the audience and knowing who you're talking with and paying attention to that is so important. I've already bought that book, everybody. That book, everybody. I can't wait to get that. But the one thing that I really started thinking, or two things I started thinking about, I'll try to make it less than 60 seconds, is number one, be curious. If you're being curious, you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about them and what else about them. And the other one that I need to get better at is when someone talks about baseball, what do I want to do? I want to start talking about baseball, my son, and all this other stuff. You know what? It's not about me. I'm trying to mirror and tell them that I have something in common. No, I need to listen to them and ask more questions. I know I have a lot of knowledge about it, but they don't need to know that now unless they're curious. So that's a big thing that I took away.
Love it.
Fantastic. Yep. Thank you, Greg. Gerald, this is your opportunity. If you'd like to come off mute and share a takeaway. We'll give you 3 seconds. All right. Dale, if you would, wrap us up.
All right.